Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Outpost. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So it also comes up, this episode answers a question I had, wondering whether Talon had told anyone about the Black Kindred, because she brings it up in front of Zed. To be fair, Zed was there when that whole conversation happened with 2, but still, I was just... obviously, it didn't say anything like when nothing came up when Janzo or Rin heard about it. So it's like, oh, it must have been one of those conversations had in between episodes or off screen. But nevertheless, obviously, it seems like at this point, it's the only means to kill Yala, because even to the point now, Rin's like, yep, this is the only option now, which obviously she was super adamant about, no, we're going to save my mom. But now it's like literally nothing they've worked, because the only thing they can find as a cure only works on those who have been controlled, and even then they only had a limited supply of that. So there's nothing else other than they have to kill Yala. And for her, it's like, especially because now Rin, I think seeing her mom basically be immortal, that nothing can kill her, probably shifted her mind. But also it's just like, she is taking this upon herself to be like, I have to be a part of this, because she blames herself, because she's like, my mom convinced me to, help her with this whole white kinge thing. And it turns out, that obviously Yala lied about the whole situation with her dad. So it's like, it turns out she took the box by force. Talon's dad didn't give it willingly, because it's like, apparently, like, what was it, like a certain number of men went with her, but only like 3 came back. So at the very least, he killed some of them. Maybe he got killed as well. But obviously for Talon, it's like, well, that means there's a chance that my dad might be alive, so I need to go to the Plane of Ashes. But it's like, you don't know your way around where he is. It's like a maze, and you need to get a map first. So we have to go back to the outpost before we do that. So at the same time, at the outpost, obviously Garrett is training up everyone, to replenish Rosman's, guards and her soldiers, but they're, newbies at this, and so wants to use Tobin's men as a means of like, hey, train them to help, but they don't want to help unless Felicita gives the word, which obviously Garrett's like, no, I'm supposed to be the one to control all this, but Felicita's like, no, my men are loyal to me and not to you. It's like, no, we're all loyal to the queen, and she gave me the power and the position, so yeah, but it's like, okay, so Garrett brings this up to Rosman. Rosman confronts Felicita about it, because for Felicita, it's like, Tobin trusts you. I put my trust in Tobin, so Tobin's loyal to you, and my loyalty to Tobin, so that should be enough for you. And it's like, well, either bow and submit to me or get out. And she kind of bows and doesn't really say anything. So it's like, no, what she ended up saying was like, as long as Tobin continues to be loyal to you, I'll be loyal to you. And it's just like, she half-assed it so much. It's like, because in Gwen's mind, it's like, oh, you only married Tobin. You didn't marry Tobin out of love. You married him as a bid for power. And she's like, what? No, I didn't. So, and in the grand scheme of things, as she was walking away, Garrett has to open his mouth about like, yeah, but Tobin will never love you. And I think he said that because this is like his friend. Obviously, like him and Rosman had their thing in the past, but also like they were childhood friends and they have that deep bond. So I think it's also like, you're the reason why my friend has a broken heart. So she's not fully happy right now. And for him, her happiness comes first and foremost, so he wants her to be happy. I mean, he's happy with Talon, so he'd want the same thing for Gwen, especially because she did have that until this all, especially because he knows, like, Tobin married her out of obligation because he needed that army to protect Gwen, so sacrificing his love for Gwen for the sake of Gwen, But obviously, Felicita didn't respond to that and activated the Red Kinge, and now they've both seen it, like, oh, you have the Red Kinge. They end up locking her up. Garrett tries to tell Tobin. Tobin's pissed, drunk, and not listening. And that leads into this like crazy fight that they have. And like Garrett's trying. I love that even though Tobin's kind of pissed, drunk, he still kind of kicks Garrett's ass to a certain extent. To be fair, Garrett's not trying to fight him at all. I even love like War Leader being like, no, stop that. Don't break the chair. You're going to pay for breaking that chair. I love that whole bit between them, and it's just like, all right, trust me. He's like, I get it. You're probably pissed about the fact is that I got this position that you feel like you deserve, and I forgot what the second thing he said was. I think it was about the whole Rosamund thing, and he was like, yes, and he's like, yes to which one? He's like, to both of them, and he's like, remember what we've been through together, our friendship, and believe me when I say Felista is possessed by, the Kinge, and it's like, all right. And they kind of laugh it off because it's like, yeah, despite being a drunk guy, he is. Because it is kind of sad that, like, to see Tobin kind of go back, like, fall backwards like that into being, like, a drunk again. But I think that was a byproduct of, obviously, like, feeling like, everything's going wrong now. It's like he had, Rosamund's love and trust, and now he no longer has that. Plus, because her not giving him that position to him probably feels even more like, oh, yeah, she doesn't trust me. And, obviously he has a whole complicated thing with Felista just because it's like, well, I don't love you. And he kind of feels like, it's like, yeah, you're trying to push me to, he even said in himself last episode, like, he wants to, any, like, mark he makes on the world, he wants to be able to do it himself. He doesn't want her to kind of set up the situation or push for it. He wants to be able to do it with his own two hands type of situation. So he goes and pleads to Rosamund. Well, he goes to see Felista, but Felista's like, stay away from me. I'm dangerous. So he goes to try and get Rosamund to, he tries to plead Felista's case, but it's like, well, she's dangerous. She almost killed Rosamund. And I love Garrett has a constant mention. Also, she almost killed me. Let's not forget about me. But then it turns into a whole thing of like, he's like, I will watch over her. Like, trust me, because it's like, it's not Tobin she doesn't trust. It's Felista because it's like, she's power hungry. And it's like, no, she's not. It's like, she married you for power. He's like, no, she wasn't. She has literally just as much power she had before marrying me as she does now that we're married. Like, her position hasn't really changed. It actually benefited. It was actually more for his benefit for her to marry him, obviously for the army and everything. But, and he's even saying like, don't let your jealousy, about, our situation cloud your judgment. And I also love Garrett being like, okay, can we get back to the point here? Because they were focusing this whole conversation became more about their relationship and their complications of it. But obviously that pissed Rosamund off, saying like, making it seem like she was letting her jealousy get the best of her. And maybe she was, but I think she was being very rational about the situation as well, considering the circumstances. So you have Janzo being sit down with her, talk to her about, hey, so this is a Kinge. It's not really like a parasite. Obviously, getting rid of this thing, obviously, it's not that easy because obviously Home Dude, which is this the first time they gave Home Dude's name? That Prime Order Soldier, I think they're saying his name is Jarrus. I think this is the first time they said it. But the fact is, it's like, yeah, he died, Kinge came to you, so getting rid of it's probably not going to be that easy even after death. So it's that, or you can pass it on to someone, which I was like, huh. I guess in my mind, because, the circumstances hasn't come up yet. Because obviously, I guess in my head, I was thinking, like, Yavala's was the only one that could be passed on. But I was stupid. I was like, right. Because, like, Reb was trying to get the Blue Kinge from Talon since last season. So it's like, yeah, because it can be, well, when the person dies, it can be passed on. But also, it can be passed on willingly. She was trying to force Talon to pass it on willingly. Last season, so I was like, I kind of forgot about that. So because I guess because it doesn't come up that often about just transferring the Kinge, there's not really a reason to. But I'm also forgetting, I'm so stupid because it's like, right, that's how the whole Prime Order Soldier got, because like obviously the Kinge is, because eventually the Kinge got passed to that kid, which that kid ended up, dying and ended up passing it to Jarrus. So it's like, I kind of forget about that whole thing, because you would never see Zed giving his up, and Talon hasn't had to be in a position where she had to give hers up. I guess, like I said, I just kept thinking in my head like it was just a Yavala thing, because hers can split, she can pass on. I was like, all Kinges can be passed on. But when the time comes, though, Gwen's there talking to her, and obviously Felista got it in her head like, wait, like what I can do is I can give it to you. You're the queen. You could do so much good with this. You someone as smart as you, as like wise as you could make so much better use, because she figured like, I can't control it, but you've been through so much, like you can be the one to control it. But I was wondering, I was like, oh, is Gwen going to get it? Because also in Felissa brings it up. It's like you'd never have to worry about Yavala ever trying to control you again. But Gwen turns it down, because it's like, for her, it's like, if I had this thing, I don't want to end up like the three ruling by fear. So it's like, for her, she didn't want to take it. So I was like, that's interesting. So Felicia's keeping it, not unless she ends up finding someone else to pass it on to. But it's like, who else would you pass it on to? Because Gwen, like, in her mind, is like the perfect candidate. Because even she was looking at initially Genzo, and Genzo was like, no, because I think for him it's like, well, for one, he's been on the other side of that Kinj, so I'm sure he wants nothing to do with it. Plus, I think probably having that Kinj will probably attract unnecessary attention. Plus, but yeah, Gwen ends up freeing her, because it's like, the fact is, I had you misjudged because I thought you were just someone that cared about power, but you were willing to give up that power. It shows you that she isn't so power hungry, and I think that's a healthy thing, to have fear of power, because you don't want to be so afraid of a power you let it consume you. You want to be able to control it, but you don't want to be so sucked into it that because absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it's a very delicate balancing act. It seems, in particular, when it comes to that Kinji. So I just thought it was kind of an interesting circumstance. And when it was all said and done, Felista bowed in front of Gwen, giving her loyalty, because like she sees like Gwen's mercy and kind of sees who Gwen is, like, that it's like, it's not even just for Tobin's sake. I'm doing this on my own accord, And obviously for Felista, being reunited with Tobin, because like both her and Gwen said back and forth about why they can recognize why Tobin cares about the other person. And especially in Gwen's case, she was like, the fact is, the way Tobin came to plead to her case is the way a husband would his wife, showing that like there is something there. But obviously she chalks it up to, hey, it's just because of our childhood like connection, like when we were children, being, having feelings for each other since back then. For her, she's like, that's the only reason why Tobin and I are at this point. It's not that he loves me. But I think that's going to be an interesting shift potentially in the future, because she gives Tobin free range to she's like, basically, I denounce our vows, so you can marry Gwen if you want to, because obviously she's the one you really love, and so that's an interesting development. I wasn't sure, and I kind of was, and they've set it up to be like, okay, it seemed like he was going to go Gwen. Like, is he going to go Gwen? Because maybe things have changed in his heart with this whole Felista situation. And we see that he has his mom's ring. So it's like, what is he going to do in the end? Is he going to be with Felista? Is he going to be with Gwen? You think Gwen, but maybe, like I said, maybe things have changed. And, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. You kind of want everyone to end up being happy, but it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Because everyone else is kind of coupling up, but now you're wondering, like, this has to leave free reign in some other regard. It's like, Zed kind of has nobody. I'm going to jump right ahead to it, because I love that the fact is, everyone else has got someone saying goodbye to him, except for Zed. He's literally the only one that doesn't have anyone. I mean, well, which there's layers to why that is, but it makes you wonder, it's like, oh, like, maybe, it's, because didn't someone had suggested, like, potentially a Zed and, Gwen situation. I was like, now that would be interesting. This could potentially lead to that, or this could end up a very like Zed and Felista situation. Probably not. Because I was about to say war leader, but I also love when Genzo and them came back, and she's like, "Where's Mutt?" It's like, I couldn't save him. He's dead. Oh, no, he's just possessed. And she hugs him. It's like, oh my god, thank God. I love that. Like that, you have to sigh a sigh of relief when it's like, oh, he's not dead. He's just possessed. Phew. Because possessed can mean you can still be saved. I mean, it makes sense in the grand scheme of things, but still. But I love that. Like, obviously, Felista having to go to Talon and Zed for advice. So it's like, okay, does your Kinj ever go out of your control? Which obviously for Zed, it's like his Kinj is never acted on its own. For Talon, she's like, it's activated on its own twice. In both situations was to save her life. And I'm like, that is interesting. So obviously it's connected to an emotional response, because the Red Kinj seems to be, it's triggered by maybe not just anger, but probably strong emotions in general. seem to be potentially the trigger, like until you learn how to fully control it. So it's like, all right, and did it change anything about you? And it's like, well, look at Zed. And he's like, my kids never changed me. She's like, no, it didn't. You were an ass from before. And Zed kind of looks at her like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, she's always like, she can't get enough of me or something like that. I was like, I love this little fact. I love their dynamic, how it has changed them from being like, well, they were kind of shagging and getting close in season 2. And then the betrayal, the complicated betrayals, both last season and this season. But also just to see them like have that like back and forth like that is just pretty dope. Some other interesting things in this episode is obviously Talon and Garrett. Obviously, like, it's like, hey, you're back and we're reunited. But obviously it's for a limited amount of time because she's got to go to the Plane of Ashes, which obviously Gwen's not a fan of her going there because it's like, you don't know if your dad's actually alive. But for Talon, it's like, yeah, there's a chance he might be alive, but also we need to find the Black Kinge, and he might be the best opportunity to find the Black Kinge. But Gwen also brings up another good point. Every time a Kinge gets involved, it turns into a terrible situation in some shape or form. So it's like, especially a Kinge that's like, oh, you touch this person, you die. Because who knows what that's going to do to like Talon? Because it might be a situation. The way they set that up, it would have to probably be Ren who ends up. I mean, I think it would make sense in the grand scheme of things if it was Ren who ended up with the Black Kinge just because like her mom has a white Kinge. But that in itself right there might turn into a complicated thing because it might be the thing of like, how do you pass on that Kinge without killing somebody? Because like if you touch someone, there's no way to pass that on, so you're probably stuck with it, which that might be the direction they take the story. If that ends up being the case, that's going to be super damn it depressing when you actually think about it. Because that means her and, Janzo could never be intimate or, kiss or anything like that, hold hands, God, that was another relationship I was thinking about recently. I think I was watching my youngest niece watch Adventure Time, and it made me think about like Finn and was it Flame Princess? How that relationship sadly played out the way it did. But there was another show. I was like, oh yeah, like CW wise, I guess I could bring up like Lana and Clark's storyline in Smallville. That was like where their storyline ended. Because she basically absorbed a whole bunch of kryptonite. They couldn't be around each other anymore. So yeah, like tangents and all that. I'm sure there's another example I was thinking of, but I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. So, but those two are good enough examples. But I think that's probably the direction they're going to take that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe they won't. Because I was about to say, like, it's like, could Talon get it? But then it's like, no, Talon's already got a kin. I mean, has there ever been anything said about whether or not you can have more than one Kinge? Because if you do have more than one, I'm sure that would kind of screw you over in some of the point. But also, like, the point I was also going to make is, before I even suggested that whole thing about, like, oh, not being able to touch anyone because you can't get rid of the Black Kinge. But also, like, who's to say the Black Kinge doesn't corrupt you? I mean, we've seen what the White Kinge did to her mom, but it's like, well, that's also, like, more so on Yavala than it is a White Kinge. But maybe there is something to that maybe the Black Kinge in particular might control you, and it might be like death, kill. It might be all about that or something. You never know. We don't know anything about this Black Kinge, so that's something to kind of be considered. And once again, with all these moving parts and pieces, it's still the big question is, where is 2 and where is 3? Like, they're still out there in the wind, so I guess they're waiting for their opportunities to kind of lay low long enough until all this potentially passes, we'll see. But, there's also the situation with Zed, because we learned that he has a brother, like, was it Corvin? And it's like, she's like, oh, I didn't know you had a little brother. He's like, yes, Talon, because I don't talk about my personal life that much or whatever. Because I also love the whole thing about, because obviously you have, Ren looking for the map, and it's like, so-and-so had the map. Well, find them. And so-and-so died in the fight pit. Oh, but it must have given it to, like, so-and-so who was, like, their brother or whatever. And it's like, oh, I'll get started on it right now. But I love that, like, Ren was like, oh, that's complicated. And he was like, and Zed's like, what are you talking about? It's like, oh, yeah, kind of. He's like, oh, there's a thing, but, oh, I know you and my brother kind of had a bit of a relationship. She's like, yeah, that's kind of a long story. He's like, no, what? tell me what's this about my brother? It's like, I'll tell you along the way. And I'm like, what is this? I'm interested to learn this. Because obviously, like, Rin had to, like, tell Genzo, and Genzo's not too happy. He was like, wait. She's like, yeah, because, like, the person who can help us out might be, because the only person who can read the map, who made that map, is still in the Plane of Ashes. And obviously it's, Corbin, Zed's brother, but it turns out like he's crazy. I wonder, has he always been crazy, or did he just eventually become crazy? Basically, she's saying like, I'm the only person he likes that he's in love with. But she was basically like, focus on the word I said there, crazy in love, because if anyone gets near him, he'll kill them except for me, if he potentially still feels that same way about me. Which obviously Janzo's looking at this like, at first he was like, wait, and you're an old boyfriend or something, but she's like, no, it's not what you think it is. Which I'm wondering, what's that story about? Because she also skipped over, she was like, yeah, I saved his life, because she was saying more so, not boyfriend, more so patient. And she's like, long story. I'm like, no, there's a lot more to that, definitely, because the fact is you want to skip over that in front of Janzo. There must be some juicy details you didn't want to go into, but it's a thing of probably some complicated stuff, but at the very least she saved his life and he became indebted to her. So it's like, yeah, anyone I don't care about, anyone that's not you, I'll kill them, but you'll always have a special place in my heart because you took care of me. Maybe soon enough, maybe in the next episode we'll kind of get the full ins and outs about the whole situation. But when it's all said and done, though, I just thought that was just kind of a cute moment between them. Just interesting circumstances all around. Like, that's gonna be interesting seeing Zed reunited with his brother and what that looks like. At the same time, there's that charlatan and who found his way into the Outpost by being like, oh, I have a cure for the infection and stuff like that, which Janzo from the beginning was like, this is BS. Turns out to be BS, no surprise there. Like, you could tell the moment he cured someone and that woman fell over, and it's just like, oh, we didn't see the Kinch leave her. It's like, yeah, so obviously he's a fake. And Janzo proves, I love that he's like, oh, I have this magic finger is going to point out the one most dangerous to the Outpost. Oh, it's you, and blah, blah, blah. It's a bug that basically gives you something that looks like it's the Kinch inside your head. And obviously he gets arrested at the end of the episode. I love that there's someone wearing a hood that trips him or whatever. I was like, oh, is that supposed to be someone significant or something? But it's like, no, I guess it's just supposed to be some random passerby that was just like, oh, you're not getting away, buddy. So that's taken care of. At the same time, sadly, which is like, you picked well, I guess I shouldn't say too much, because I'm about to say you're so shitty for doing that. Honestly, him taking a terrible situation and benefiting from it, lo and behold, that's what Eleanor did. She literally found out about how the Plagueling thing worked, and she was still selling Calypsum. She was making a huge profit off of it, in season 2. So it's like, not too much of a surprise in that regard. So it's actually kind of the same thing. Literally the same thing. And maybe that's kind of what they were going for. Because of his negligence, because it's like, you creating this situation where people think there's a cure, you let that guard let his wife get close enough to him to infect him, because it's like, oh, he thought she was cured. And so, but it's like, I don't care what happens. Like, it's that, I think that apocalypse mentality of like, oh, let me make as much money as possible and I can run as far away as I need to. I can live a life with whatever I need just because I made a killing off of this. Like, who cares if I'm screwing people over and they're going to let their guard down? It's not my problem. That's their problem, not mine. I know it's not a cure, so I'm not going to be caught off guard like that. But obviously now we have it spread to at least, well, not just 3 people, because at the end, the gates open up because now a whole swarm of people have come into the Outpost. Now it's going to spread it around, so that's going to make things even more complicated. Luckily, you have Felicity there. If we could get her to channel her Kinch, she can knock out quite a few people, because that can wipe out, like, it's a proximity thing. So if there's a close enough amount of people, you can hurt them. Granted, to prevent them from spreading, that's going to be like a shit ton of people you're going to have to sadly kill. So that guy screwed them over, and luckily he's going to be in a jail cell, eventually he's going to get caught up in it anyway, but still. Very like zombie, like, oh, zombies broken through the gates type of situation of like, man, we are uber screwed over. It seems like one of those, circumstances. So I'm interested to see kind of how things end up playing out from here. It's just like they were worried, like, no, Talon, you need to stay here. And it's like, Talon's like, I need to do this. And it's like, just the moment you leave, shit goes sideways big time in the outpost. But Yavala's got, this is the biggest threat to her. So she needs to get that under her control. But, well, she's not aware that the Red Kinge is here. I mean, at the very least, it protects Felista. So, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how, like I said, that all ends up playing out. Curious to see what ends up happening. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.